Today we are talking about executive presence. And as I get started talking about executive presence, I first want to open the line, and I know Elise is driving and Melanie, you just jumped on, but I think that executive presence is this thing that people are talking about, that the leadership community perhaps is using. It's one of those new buzzwords. And if anybody wants my thoughts on buzzwords, happy to talk about it. I just started actually a clubhouse with a long-standing friend and somebody who I really respect in terms of how she operates in business. Started that clubhouse this weekend, and our first topic was the danger of buzzwords and buzz phrases in corporate. So I definitely have some thoughts about that, but I think that the term executive presence is deserving of diving a bit deeper. So I would like to put you all on the spot, and at least I'm giving you a warning, but I'm going to go to Melanie first. I'd like to ask, and there's no wrong answers here, I'd like to just ask what comes to mind first for you when you hear the term executive presence.
So I'm gonna get started even if I'm driving, and hopefully there is a good enough stable connection. I'm in a poorly covered area, but I'll try. So for me, executive presence is kind of like, sometimes when I'm in, like with new people, right, in a new job or some social event, I look for people that sort of like have that aura around them of some sort that you see them and then they start talking and all of a sudden you're like, okay, that's the person in charge. That's to me what executive, presence means. It's somebody that in a meeting where you don't know who's the boss, and as people start talking, you can identify the one that is actually either as the charisma or as that kind of tone, or even the body language, like how they are sitting up maybe straight or looking at people in their eyes, and you can tell in a way whether they're really truly officially in charge or something or not, but you can see how assertive they are, or how they kind of can transmit that sense of like, I know what we're talking about, or I know what we're here for, and things like that. So that's how I typically define it.
Yes. So one thing that I just want to call upon that you've said before I go to Melanie next is you've mentioned they may or may not actually be the boss. They may or may not actually be maybe the decision maker, maybe the person by name in charge. However, there's this presence, and there I am using the term, but there's this aura, like you said, of their command.
Yeah, and I use that also, like in my own teams, to kind of look for people that do have those kind of, in a way, soft skills to become managers or leaders. That it's more obvious to other people that they can execute that kind of function. So I don't base all my decisions on that, but I definitely do look at it as one of the components of like, can this person be successful managing another group of people? Do they have that kind of like presence, that kind of, demeanor or attitude, or, those kind of skills that would allow them to establish themselves as the person to look to for decisions or for, suggestions and things like that.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think that's really valuable. One final question, and then I'll let you stay on mute for a few minutes. Do you think that that what you're describing is only something that's innate, or do you think it's also something that can be learned?
I would say both, but I have met a number of people that kind of had it in themselves. I see it in some kids too, that kind of like presence of being the ones that either like to organize or lead, or, some of those aspects, I feel like they are part of somebody's personality.
Mhm.
And certainly, things can be learned, but, and I think you can make it a point of being like, okay, I need to be more assertive, or this situation require me to speak up or do certain things so that I can sort of establish that presence. But definitely, I think there is one, and some people, I believe they are just born with, and some people may need to learn it or may want to learn it so that they can actually deliver that additional component or acquire that additional skill for their career or their lives.
Wonderful. Thanks, Elisa.
Now,
sure. Melanie, if I can turn it over to you, and for Angela, who just joined, and anybody that may just be joining the Facebook stream, we are talking about what comes to us first when we hear the terminology executive presence. And there's no wrong answers to this. I'm simply curious what everybody thinks when they hear what may be at this point an overused term, an overused jargon in leadership, which is executive presence.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that Elisa went first, but that you gave the question first so that I could give my response, because I think hers is way more beautiful than mine, because mine is very concrete. I think at least the way that I naturally think of it is absolutely learned. And I think of it as being physically and mentally there.
Ooh.
So like part of executive presence is the person is in the office, the person has an open door, the person is at the important meetings, the person is at the important functions, but also, and I think that I'm overlapping a bit with Elisa on the mental part of it, like that they're mindful that they're there at the meeting. They're not doing something else while they're at the meeting. They are tuned in, they know what's going on. They ask questions when they don't understand, like they're in there.
Cool.
And I think of it, I'm a behaviorist. So I want to think everything is learned, although I totally agree that there are some people who find all of this like very breezy, and other people who very carefully have to teach themselves, like, this is how you're supposed to be in front of a group. But yeah. So physically and mentally there, very concrete.
What I love is the complementary aspects and the juxtaposition of what both of you have said. Because it gives so much more depth to the conversation than just saying that person has executive presence. Well, what exactly does that mean? Like, now I'm seeing an aura, I'm seeing somebody that's really present. I keep going, Melanie. I was
going to say, the other piece is, I don't know executive presence as a jargony word. And so I don't have any baggage with it.
Hey, everyone.
Nope.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. All right. Well, I think I'm back. I knew it. I knew it. I think I hear typing.
That's me. Oh, I turned my video off because I was trying to help with the bandwidth.
Yeah, I turned my video off too. Okay, well, maybe we have audio and we're all here via audio right now.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So Melanie, you were adding something to that when I rudely got disconnected.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't have any knowledge of the word executive presence. So I also don't have any baggage with it.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I heard the baggage. Okay. So it's not necessarily a term that you feel is overused in the academic setting.
And at least not around me.
Okay. All right.
If you want to talk overused, we'd have to talk about servant leaders, but yeah.
Ooh. Okay.
But only by people who don't want to serve.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that might be a future topic. Okay. I like that. What is servant leadership, and why is it only perpetuated or discussed by people that actually don't want to serve? That's a little cynical, but I like it. No, I appreciate that maybe there's nothing really coming with the terminology of executive presence for you, and that's a fresh perspective, because I also feel like I have heard that for like the past year and a half. And there are times where I feel it's so overused that it makes me cringe. When someone just behaves well in a meeting, when normally they're poorly behaved, but because they have many credentials and a lot of experience and a lot of intelligence, that's normally tolerated. So when they start to behave better and someone's like, oh, they really showed up with their executive presence, and I'm just like, no, they just behaved well today. And we don't know if they're medicated or what, but we're glad. Yeah, I think that's great that you don't have the baggage. Angela, if it's okay, and welcome today, I'd love to just get any thoughts that you may have on what the term executive presence brings up for you. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, and I'm just curious what everybody thinks about when they first hear it.
Good morning. I think it's still morning.
Hi.
No, it's not. It's afternoon. The day's getting away from me here. Yes. So I actually had both of the two first responses both came to mind, like the executive presence in the sense of somebody who just has command in a room and they just naturally have that presence that leads you to believe they're an executive or a decision maker or something along those lines, with just how they carry themselves and interact with others. But then also, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, but as the second person commented, of just that true physical sense. For me, being a leader is a lot about visibility. And so when you said presence, I was thinking literally like present, like I am present, I'm in this moment, I'm listening to you, I'm out visible, I'm interacting with you as the leader of this team. And so it's really twofold for me in that sense. And it was really interesting to hear, sorry if I'm talking too much. It was really interesting to hear the last person who just spoke about I don't really like the negative side of executive presence, or also Tara, what you shared in just now of the negative side of executive presence, of like how somebody can elude that, but maybe not truly have that be who their character is. But they still come across and get the, I guess, credit for being having
Right.
executive presence, or being somebody who has it all together and is the leader, but behind closed doors, they're probably going to their VP or the person under them and saying, okay, what do I do next? But then comes across and takes all the credit, and then therefore gets that executive title and the stuff that comes with it. So that was an interesting one that didn't initially come to mind, but once I heard you guys talk about it, I was like, okay, I could see that. Like, yeah, that would be have a negative connotation to this term, I guess, in that sense. So yes, thank you for allowing me to share.
Lovely. No, I'm so glad you did. Thank you. All right, Janessa, do we have anything in the chat that we should incorporate, or can I keep going? I think I can keep going unless I hear something. All right. Yeah, stop me, Janessa, if there's anything in the chat that I should comment on, or that we want to weave into this discussion, or go ahead and just throw it in the chat for me here in Zoom. Okay, so the reason that I titled today, and again, this is the fourth of our 4-part series on Power With. The reason that I titled it Control and Executive Presence is most definitions or textbook definitions of executive presence relate to the ability to inspire confidence in others. So there's some variation on that theme in almost all definitions that I found when just looking for what does executive presence mean? The ability to inspire confidence in others. And for me, and as I think about it, that loops back to control, because we have confidence in others when they have control of themselves. When someone is in a leadership position and they're handed a complete mess of a project, or they think everything's on track, they show up to a meeting where they're told that, everything's off track, the timelines have been shifted by 3 months. When they start freaking, or if they start freaking, either visibly or through anger. You know, there's many different ways in which people react. Let's use that term, react, rather than freaking. But that's really what they're doing, right? They're freaking. Their emotional limbic system has taken over control. They are reacting. They are either angry at someone, they are upset, you know, they may be exuding emotions that are not appropriate, or maybe they're appropriate, but they're not instilling confidence. And when we think about executive presence as the ability to instill confidence, really what I think about when I think about how to increase executive presence, either when working on myself or when working with those that I coach, is I'm thinking about that space between when there's a stimulus and there's a response. And Viktor Frankl has this amazing quote attributed to him. And I don't want to mess it up, so I'm actually looking at it right now. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And that is just, that's so powerful. It's one that very much resonates with me. And so I wanted to talk today a bit about what is happening physiologically when we are presented with something that triggers what could be a reaction, right? And what we can possibly do to move it from reaction to response. So just to step back so that it's clear how I'm describing this, the freaking, right? The oh my gosh, the anxiety ridden, the anger, maybe it depends on how we as individuals react naturally, right? That is a reaction. That's what I'm defining a reaction. It's almost an automatic reaction to something, rather than a response, which may be like, yes, my initial reaction is to freak, to be like, how was this not brought up to me 3 months ago? How did you not do that? You know, that's the reaction. No, instead I want to respond. So what's happening physiologically for us? As I mentioned, our limbic system is in hyperdrive. So that is our fight, flight, or freeze response. And we may be having any of those responses. Some of us have a tendency towards freeze, where you've got nothing. You're presented with a big pile of junk, and you've just got this blank slate. There's a freeze example. Now, what can you do to move yourself out of a limbic system response? Well, truthfully, by starting to touch, like you may be able to just start tapping your fingers together, even under a table. So if you're thinking of picturing yourself in a big boardroom, a big academic meeting, some crap just landed on your plate and you are in fight, flight, or freeze, and you know that, you are acknowledging in your mind that you're there. If you start to do this, you are starting to activate not only your motor cortex, right, your prefrontal cortex, but your somatosensory cortex. You are engaging additional parts of your brain that otherwise were disengaged. Your limbic system was in a hyperdrive, and all the blood flow, all the stimulus, what was happening was predominantly there. And that is more of a reactionary situation. You want to move to a response. So this is one example. This just tapping of fingers, you could be squeezing them into balls. You know, you could dig your fingers into your thighs, you know. And I'm picturing, like, what would you do if you were sitting in a boardroom? You could be squeezing your knees. Like, nobody would be seeing that. If you're just on a Zoom meeting, you might quickly turn off your camera, stand up, stomp around. You know, I think about my 4-year-old who really right now sometimes wants to lash out, and I'm like, go punch the pillow. Like, you know, it's hard to get her to do that. But these are the types of things that if nobody is seeing, we can at least start to do to move us from the thinking body to the whole body, where we are not only thinking beings, but we're feeling beings too. We're acknowledging that there is this reactionary response, or this reactionary tendency that we don't want to employ. We would prefer to respond with a response, with a considered response. And that's also something that we need to start embracing more of. A pause, even a long, uncomfortable, significant pause, is okay. It is better than a reaction coming out. Sometimes you might, if you're in a Zoom meeting, need to throw in the chat, I just need a minute, you know, rather than saying anything. That way people aren't saying, you know, have you dropped off? Blah, blah, blah. I just need a minute. I'll get right back to you. Or you're in that meeting room. People see that you're thinking, you know, you're actually with others and you're having a presence there, but you are doing something to activate your motor cortex, your somatosensory cortex. Maybe you start talking. If you have a tendency towards nervous talking, but you can also default to asking a few questions. If you are asking questions that can help you be formulating what your response will be, activating that auditory cortex is another way of helping to move you out of that limbic system activation. So these were some things that I wanted to start talking about, start thinking about, and I'm just going to pause now and read what's in the chat and see if there are any thoughts on that, any questions about that. And yeah, Angela, what you wrote about, yes, the duck on water, right? Seeming calm and smooth on top, but furiously paddling, thinking under the water, right? Which goes unseen to others. There is something to that. And executive presence sort of, I want to say personified, but it's actually an animal trait. So, but thinking about animal or executive presence rather in that way as the duck, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I can see that. That's great. And Melanie, asking the question for the pause resonated for you. Yes, if you can start asking questions, even if your first question is really like a softball question, you know the answer, but you know that engaging, you know, the auditory and the verbal cortex parts of your brain in the prefrontal cortex will help you start to move through it. That is a great solution. The caution that I put there, and I only put it there because for me, it's a caution that I need to be careful of, is what does the tone of your voice sound like, right? If you can bring it to a place where it's at least just measured and flat, then that's fine. In the event that you feel like your voice may shake, that's sometimes okay too. Emotions are not something that we need to be fearful of, or not something I think we need to be fearful of in the professional setting, even when we're working to embody executive presence, right? Executives, women that lead, people that lead that are human, we have emotions. It's okay. Denying that is BS, right? So even if your voice is to crack, let it go. Like, that does not mean you can't still instill confidence in others. And then where this, for me, correlates and really resonates with the power with paradigm is that we do not have to have all of the answers. Actually, us being knowers keeps us from being learners, keeps us from formulating a better plan with the team, with people that are experts. Yes, we may be an expert on something, but if we are in a situation where we have a bunch of people that have come to the table for a reason, they are qualified, they have experience, maybe you have more experience with this direct situation, but you have people there. Even just knowing in your head and reminding yourself of the fact that you may be looked to lead the response, but you alone don't have to create the response. That can also bring us back to executive presence. So that idea of power with, of knowing that you will create a better plan together. And yes, it might be all on your shoulders to help create that plan, to drive the creation of that plan. That still doesn't mean all of the answers have to come from you. And I'm just looking again in the chat. So going back to what is executive presence, we had a comment come in from Facebook about how to present yourself around senior management. That definitely is one thing about executive presence when you're managing up, right? How to present yourself around senior management. And I think about it as really managing in both directions. And even like CEOs have to manage in both directions, right? They've got the board, or they've got investors, and they've got those that they're leading. Those of us in middle management, right? We've got our executive or more senior leadership team, and then we've got those that report into us. So there's many different ways that this executive presence shows itself, and it is bi-directional. And I'm just looking again at the chat to see what else is coming in. Acknowledge that I'm still considering whatever I'm reacting to, right? And ask what others think about it. That's a great thing. And Melanie, that may even be a good default verbal and auditory cortex stimulation, right? So knowing for yourself that whenever something big comes, you can be like, all right, everybody, I am processing this and thinking about, you know, what our next steps may be. I just need a couple of minutes, right? If you've practiced something like that, if you're going into what could be a strenuous conversation, or it's just something you want to practice saying every day so that it really comes out naturally, that's a great default, Melanie, that you're adding in about acknowledgement and buying yourself a bit of time. So any thoughts on the power with paradigm and the thought of executive presence, and how tapping into the knowledge that we are stronger leaders when we're engaging our team can actually help us to feed into and strengthen our executive presence? It's a quiet group again this week. That's what I get for having such a great discussion last week. Quieter group this week. Anybody's, am I still there?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Elisa, wonderful.
I totally agree on the whole line of what has been discussed. I tend to do that. I tend to ask for the pause. You know, when big question comes, so like I, you know, tend to be like, let me look into this, you know, I'll get back to you, you know, later today. I give them a specific time, right? Whoever it is, the board, the investors, whoever, my boss, it's like, let me look into this. I usually acknowledge that I don't have the answer right then. And then I set a time when I'm gonna get back so that I can be held accountable for that. And then the very next step is me reaching out to my team and be like, hey, this came up, what's going on? How do we take care of it? You know, let's formulate a plan or something like that, right? And depending on what it is, sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's more time, but there is always a stepwise process. So that's how I've, for most part, that's kind of my fallback.
So you're
plan.
saying, can I just clarify? You're saying that normally you actually look to disengage from that immediate conversation to get the plan in place, get all the answers. How do you navigate it when it's appropriate that you actually keep discussing it? You've got all the key players there. Maybe you've just been handed a big piece of bad news, but all the people that you would otherwise loop around with are actually around the table, be it virtual or real life.
Yeah, that one is a little bit more complicated, but I tend to typically lower my voice. Speaking of tone, right? I lower my voice, and not because I'm shy or anything like that, but it's an attempt to reduce the potential escalation of the emotional reaction, either mine or somebody else's, right? If it's like, okay, let's kind of, keep the voice low and calm. And then let's discuss about this. And then I ask questions, just like you were suggesting and somebody else was suggesting. It's like, try to understand more. It's like, okay, so we heard that, this horrible thing happened. Okay, it's like, okay, what are the details? What happened? Who reported it? And then try to engage in a conversation that it's more like problem solving oriented rather than focusing on like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. It's like, okay, well, so how does this impact, whatever is the other thing that we wanted to do, or, what do we need to do? How about maybe this other thing, right? It depends obviously on the situation and the topic and how, one can connect the dots and see whether there is. It's really, I tend to try to be as much solution oriented as possible. That's always my go-to response, from a professional point of view. It's always like, okay, how do we, what else can we do, right? How about this? How about that? And engaging other people in that And I find it actually more helpful because people get into that, like, oh, let's think about, yeah, how do we fix this kind of idea, and brings everybody back to a more rational spot.
Yes.
And I have to say, it usually works. I'm sure there has been, situations where it's like, forget it, people are already, off the handle. So in that case, I just let them, I actually freeze. I have the same, like if somebody's like yelling, I just don't engage. It's just like even if they are yelling at me, it's like, I'm not allowing you this, so I'm just not gonna talk.
Yeah.
And there has been other times when I had said maybe once or twice, is like, when you're calm, we can talk about this, but I'm not gonna talk about this now. And just kind of like left it there. And if I have to sort of hear the other person yelling, so be it. I just zone out.
Yeah, there was so much greatness in what you've just added. So one thing that you said was that you lower your voice. I suspect you probably also deliberately slow your voice. And maybe maybe lowering forces you to slow it. And that is great because it slows down the situation. There again, we're looking to move from the reactionary to, really shallow breathing, right, to slower, more presence of being. So that's wonderful. You also mentioned explicitly that this is what works really well for you in the professional realm. And I wanted to call that out because this is also something that we could think about. And the term executive presence, like in the kitchen, sounds a little strange unless you're a professional chef, but this is something that we can also employ in our home. And it's a great thing to model for our partners, for our children. The desire, and it's a practice, as it is in the workforce, right? As it is in industry, as it is in academia, it's a practice to, okay, when I actually want to yell, when I have this default that I want to go to, that it seems actually more acceptable to do at home than it is in the office, but truthfully, it's probably not great to do in either location. Maybe instead I can start to slow it down, start to lower my voice, start to get quieter. Again, not always something easy to do, very much a practice, but I wanted to just call that out because it is something else that we can do. And then even to translate, like bringing us back to that problem solving. Okay, you can problem solve about a big crisis that's happening with a lab. And guess what? You can problem solve about the fact that your kids forgot to tell you that they have a field trip. And as a result, they don't have what they need and the stores are closed. Like, there are problem solving tendencies that we can practice in both realms of our life, in all realms of our life, right? I'm giving specific home and specific work examples, but there's all the things in between, like when the dry cleaner ruins your dress just before you're going to a wedding or whatever it may be, right? There's always the ability to practice problem solving. And we have this beautiful cycle where when we practice it one way in one location, it makes it easier to do everywhere. When we're looking at showing up as a whole person everywhere and practicing it, we have this chance to embody executive presence and maybe even rename it to something less work related and more life related. Like I have whole being presence, or, so something that transcends any realm of life. And Angela, I see you have your hand raised. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm probably monopolizing rather the room.
No, you're totally fine. It's just your segue into thinking about this and how it's relevant to our personal lives as well just reminded me of a post that I did a few weeks ago. And it was also something I ended up sending in an email to my staff. For nobody in this group knows me, so hi, I'm Angela, and I was a principal at an elementary school until just a few days ago, and now I'm an executive leadership coach. And so, but I was going to share that with you guys because it was very relevant to how to take this concept of executive presence and being in control of our emotions and maintaining that in our personal lives as well. And it's a quote by L.R. Nost, and it says, "When little people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it's our job to share our calm, not join their chaos." And that is relevant. You can take out little people and just put anybody in the middle of that quote, because that's really what executive presence in this sense of how we're talking about it now can be all about. It's about
Totally.
having that executive control, as you're saying, Tara, over your responses and your emotions, to be the one who's providing the calm in the midst of the chaos.
I
So I just thought I would share that.
I love that quote. And even the idea that when little people feel big emotions, and Melanie, maybe you want to chime in on this as a behaviorist. Really, when we as big people feel those big emotions, I would hypothesize that it's because we're actually embodying our little people there, right? Like we were never taught how to grow up through those big emotions and become big people with these big emotions. So I think we're embodying and we're being our little selves in that sense. I don't know, Melanie, if you have a thought on that, again, as a behaviorist.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say, and thank you very much, Angela, for your comment, because then it made me think through it, that one of the things that helps to predict self-efficacy, which is kind of another version of confidence, the belief you can do something, is to be physiologically calm.
Ooh.
And so if you can say something, if you could say something at the meeting that really allows everyone, and I think kind of saying, gosh, I'm still thinking about that. If you really could help bring down the emotion in the room, it's going to actually make everyone feel more confident.
Mm-hmm. And to Lisa's point, helping to move them to problem solving rather than problem perpetuating or creating like an echo chamber of panic, right?
Yes. And I will also tell you that I have been in situations where you're kind of told you don't get a minute. Like it's really valued to give a fast answer. Mm-hmm. And it's not something like literally we were setting up our mission statement. It was not something where there's a fire. What do we do? Let me think about it while the building's burning. It was really like we were setting up a mission statement. I would argue we had plenty of time to think. And that if I wanted, So I was given a minute, but then literally they kind of did a quick round robin. And then they're like, now, Melanie, tell us what you think. And I'm like, I'm really still processing it. Like, because I really was. I'm like, I wasn't messing with them.
Right.
Like, I think this is important. And I think that we need to think through it. And I think all these other ideas are stupid, which I did not say out loud, just in my head.
Because you gave yourself a minute, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
to embarrass myself like all these other people have just done. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so important because very much in our society and in organizations, speed is sometimes valued above quality. And we owe it to ourselves to be able to say to someone else, we're not ER physicians here, right? I mean, some of us might be, but I'm not. In this situation, we're not talking about, like you said, a life or death response. We're not talking about acting immediately. We are saying, actually, I can't respond that fast, or I need a minute. I'm still processing. Maybe even, wow, what you're saying is really big and you deserve more than my immediate reaction. Something to, again, just buy ourselves time. And the fact that, again, I'm thinking about a reinforcing circle. Like when you give yourself the respect to say to someone, I need more time. You can't pressure me on this. It's okay. You are standing firm and rooted in what you know to be true about yourself. And that allows you to, again, think more about what is the proper response. How do you lead in this situation?
Yeah, and I think in the situation I just gave you, it was definitely a power over dynamic, which is, I think the speed goes very much along with that. You tell me your best idea, you give it to me right now with like this like embarrassment pressure. And
right.
I think that
and
was
how
intentional.
Power over dynamic respond? How did the power over dynamic respond when you told them to slow down?
They didn't really accept it. They're really like, okay, well, how about now? How about now? How about now? No, there wasn't
really.
Yeah, no.
I've seen the okay, we'll come back to you. Let's go to whoever else is ready. As in like dismissing your thought process and thought processing time. Yeah, both of those are dismissive. Sorry, go ahead, Angela.
Yeah.
No, I'm curious as to what the outcome of this mission statement activity was, because as in school, we do mission statements in a variety, like there's a district level mission statement. So as a principal, I was a part of that conversation. But then as at the site level, each of our schools, we would develop our own mission statements. And we actually employ a practice of the kind of that quick initial response, like less than a minute in some cases, of just what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you talk about what we're all about as a corporation, as a team, as a school. What do we embody? What do we value? And they want that first thing that pops in your mind as the catalyst to start off the conversation. So I was curious when you first said that, I was like, well, I can see value in the 1 minute time frame, because it's like when you're doing a mission statement, you want it to be something that everybody in your group can embody and latch onto. And so if it's something that comes to mind quickly, then it's going to be something that they can then have buy-in on and implement for you as part of your team, and be a part of that mission in like a very like living it out type of way. And so that's why I was curious, like, what was the outcome of your mission statement? Did you guys arrive at one that everybody was on board with? And was that 1 minute exercise just simply a starting point and a catalyst for the deeper conversation of doing, because then we do that. We get it all on paper, and then we start to fine tune the wordsmithing. And then we end up with something that sounds beautiful and is, you know, and sounds professional and all of that things. But it was a brain dump kind of activity. But it sounds like I saw you shake your head. So you were not experiencing a brain dump activity.
Honestly, it was, we did like a really open kind of brainstorming session, and then a subcommittee took it and really revamped, in my opinion, going far away from the things we had talked about. And then I think it was honestly silent pressure to give positive feedback.
Mm.
Can you tell me what you think in a positive way only? Because that's really all we're looking for here.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Hence your realization that it was a power over dynamic. Yeah, that makes sense now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It sounds like a not so great experience. And
get on board with it, like, oh, I love it, but I couldn't specific. I don't want to.
Is that me again? Or is it Melanie this time?
Last time it was me.
Oh, okay. All right. I think it was you then. But you're back now.
I'm back now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if I can speak, I don't know if I'm speaking over anyone. I'm sorry if I am. I can't hear anyone else speaking. I think that Angela and her point that she has brought up reminds us all of the importance of setting the stage appropriately, right? If you are doing a brain dump where it's like, no, tell us the first thing that comes to mind. It doesn't matter how, like, there's no wrong answer. That is very different, and that can still feel like pressure, like you should be coming up with something novel, but at least everybody's in the same boat there, that the idea is this is a brain dump. Go quickly, let's just drop in a bunch of things, versus tell us what you think about this statement. And really, you don't know what you think yet, and you're not looking for immediate reaction. So yeah, the importance, and for us all to be cognizant of the importance of setting the stage appropriately so that people can position their mindset in the right way, where they might want to slow things down, or it's just not the right situation to slow things down. So great ad.
And the reason I did my fast head shake, no, when Angela was saying that is because I think in your situation, it was actually an attempt to really get a more natural response. Like, don't overprocess this. Give me your real thought.
Your gut feeling.
In my situation, I think it was really like, tell us how much you love this. And I was like,
tell us your real thought, but only the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, let me process how I might say this back to you so that you're able to hear it. And I'm going to need more time in order to tell you how I feel in a way that you will be able to hear.
Right. Wonderful. Well, thanks for that addition. All right, before I go through just what's coming, I just want to open the floor. If there are any questions, anything anybody wants to be publicly in this group coached on, anything that you're thinking about or want to talk about before we get into what's coming in the coming weeks. Janessa, is there anything in the chat that I'm missing right now, just out of curiosity? I don't think so. Okay. All right. Well, then I'll talk to you about what's coming up next. And of course, you can always reach out in our Facebook group. If you have any questions in the interim, you can come next week. And if you have anything that you want to talk about, this is an opportunity not just for some training and discussion around a topic, but also for you to come with anything that's related or unrelated to said topic that you would like some coaching on. So what we've got coming up next week on Wednesday, we're talking about the importance of practice. And specifically, we'll be going into tiny tweaks and how they can really change your life. Then from there, we are talking about making meetings work. The week after that, we're going to be talking about positioning your day and your mindset. And then the week after that, we are looking at the joy of networking. That brings us through early July. And then the week of July 12th, we are doing another Leading with Your Whole Self workshop. So for those of you that have been through that workshop before, it's a free workshop. And we're taking a lot of the feedback that we've gotten. You know, we've now run this workshop 3 times, I think, in 2021, and we're making it shorter. There is so much content and it can seem like a really heavy time investment. It still is going to be a full week. It's not going to be longer than a week, though. I used to do bonus sessions. I'm basically taking the best and the items that were most loved and what people seem to really gravitate towards and parsing it down a little bit. So instead of it being an hour where I'm like jamming information in until the very end, I'm working to reduce the information so that it's a bit more manageable. We will be going Monday through Friday, and I'm looking still to figure out the best time for the most amount of people to join, you know, live, because again, the discussion is really valuable, but it's going to be a lighter workshop. So the week of July 12th, if you've been through the Leading with Your Whole Self workshop before and you want a reset, definitely get that on your calendar. If you've been through it and you don't need it right now, but you know of someone, another female that you know that might benefit from it, please start to let them know. We'll get out some more information and let you know how to register in a couple of weeks. But I wanted to seed that because July 12th, again, we will be doing I don't want to say a watered down version, but a more appropriate version for a week, right? I've been sometimes giving you all too much information. We will be doing another Leading with Your Whole Self workshop. So July 12th, get that penciled in. Any questions before I close the call for today?
Oh, I was just going to tell you, you're on my calendar for July 12th. That works good.
Yes. That's excellent. That's wonderful. And if you have any questions, reach out. Don't hesitate to reach out. If you're watching later, please hit #replay so we can follow up with you. Make sure that we are addressing any questions. If you don't have the Zoom trainings on your calendar and you would like to get them on your calendar, please reach out to us. Although at least one of you, we keep sending it and it's not sticking, so you might have to apply it yourself. But let us know if you would like the calendar invite and you don't have it. We are here to help support. So you can reach out to me or Janessa, and I hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the great discussion.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye, everyone.